Welcome back to the Movie Geek Podcast. I'm your host, George T, as always, and welcome back to everyone. Last week, we finally got a video up on the YouTube side. It actually went pretty well, although I know there's some critiquing I have to do with this one, so hopefully this one will be a little bit brighter and sound quality will be a little bit better. Obviously for you on the Spotify and other audio apps, obviously hopefully we haven't had any volume issues. So we're still working in progress here. I know it has been it's been a lot of fun to do all this, and can't wait to keep going. So this episode will be all about the history of horror, where horror started and how the movies came about, what genres are out there, because the genres have become so crazy. There's just a multitude now of horror genres. And I will go through a list of my picks for movies that came out yearly. By decade. And then I will give you a list of movies that were voted the top in their decades, and then I will give you my take on one list or one movie that was voted number one horror scariest movie of all time. And I guarantee you, you may think the same way as I do. I think it is absolutely the scariest movie ever. So, with that being said, let us get into this. And, horror, captivates a lot of people. There are a lot of people that don't like horror films, and understandable. There's a lot of fear, anxiety over, scary clowns, or slashers, or being stalked, or being trapped in a room, and it's just, or a haunted house, for example. Now, as a paranormal investigator, part-time obviously, and somebody who grew up watching horror, and it's kind of funny is that when I was a kid, and I'll get into this later, but when I saw Poltergeist for the first time, it absolutely scared me. And I used to sleep with my covers over my head. I was so scared of being, outside of my blankets and sheets that, something was going to attack me. And it's so weird how now I can just go into a haunted house and, try to talk to spirits and not be scared at all. And so it's kind of crazy, but there's just a lot of great things that came out of horror. There are some things that I don't like about horror films or horror genres, and I'll get into those when I get into the genres. But I want to just quickly mention that I have the results of the poll that Warner Brothers and Fandango did on their Instagram post. I do not agree with the fan votes, and I honestly am a little shocked, but I don't know what the demographic was or anything else. It's just an Instagram post. And I just feel like the end result is more of not from my generation, but from this generation. And I'll go over all of that very soon. I just want to quickly give you the weekend box office from this past weekend. And the reason why I say that is because number one was the horror film Terrifier 3. This movie had a $500,000 budget. Okay, Art the Clown has become such a iconic horror figure. These movies, you may or may not like them. You may think they're the most disgusting films ever. I will have a a little show about Terrifier series later after I see Terrifier 3. But again, this movie had a $500,000 budget. And in its first weekend, it made $18.9 million. I mean, crazy to think that this movie, which started out as a small picture that was at these small independent film things, and it got such a great reaction that the second one came out and it got big stars, and it just has spawned such a great response. Terrifier 3 also combined with Ice Nine Kills, and I'm going to mention Ice Nine Kills is because they are a local band who I mentioned in the last one, does a lot of movie songs. So they had cooperated with Terrifier 3 and did a promotional new video for that movie. I thought it was awesome. So, great for Ice Nine Kills. Side note, I would really like to get them on the show, or at least Spencer. So if anybody knows anything, let me know. Anyway, second place was Wild Robot at 14 million. Beetlejuice continues to roll along, 7.3 million. And number one last week was The Joker. So this fell 81% down from the week before, made 7 million. So again, I'm going to mention this every time a DC movie fails. It's DC. I know that it is not directly related to the DCEU or the DCU as they're being called, but it's not that good. I will say though, however, I did see the first episode of Penguin, and my son George and I will continue to watch it. And so far, through that first episode, it might be watchable. It has a little connection to the Gotham series that was on Fox that, is not Batman related. Like, Gotham was a young Bruce Wayne trying to become Batman. And so this has a pretty good showing. And then number 5 was Piece by Piece, which is the Lego movie about Pharrell Williams, his music career and whatnot. Okay. So, let us get into what the meat of this podcast will be, this episode. The horror genres, horror movies in general. So, where did horror start? It is believed that it started through folklore and religion back in the ancient Roman days. So, again, if you do read a lot of these Gothic novels, you read anything with folklore, a lot of it has some horror in it. And again, this is where the genres, there are 5 main genres, and then subsequently out over the years that they have branched out and so on. So there's a lot of branches to this, but there are 5 fundamental ones. So later on when we get into movies, there is movies that you don't really identify as horror that actually are horror in some way, and I'll get into all that soon. But anyway, so the ancient Romans were some of the first that came up with this. And then obviously through the years, the other cultures had their folklores and myths and legends and so on. So it just kept growing and growing. The first Gothic novel was written by Horace Walpole. It was called The Castle of Ontario. It was written in 1765, and it told obviously of the castle that was haunted. So over the years, there were more and more of these stories that came out and so on. And then, obviously, in 1890, the first movie camera, was made by Thomas Edison and William Dickerson. Subsequently, there was, the book, and then there was pictures, and then there was motion pictures. Obviously, silent films, because, obviously, sound was not a thing for cameras back then. So, 1902, the first horror movie was produced. It was called A Trip to the Moon. That was a full-length feature film. Before that, there were two 3-minute small films made by a Frenchman named Georges Méliès. It was in 1896, The Haunted Castle, and then The Bewitched Inn. Obviously, there was actually French titles. I only translated to English. So those 3-minute films made him famous. Then in 1902, he did his full-length feature film. Obviously, again, all silent films. So horror, in that regard, was more visual and psychological. And so you could see what was happening on the screen, and obviously your fear and horror would be seen in that film. So that was kind of an impressive little, history that I, researched and wanted to share with you guys with this episode. And so eventually, into 1920, the first big film on the big screen came out, and it was voted the best of that era in the 1920s, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligula. So this film really got the ball rolling for the bigger audiences once the movie theaters started opening and so on, and obviously another silent film. Alright, so let us get into the genres of horror, the 5 major ones. So there is the gore and disturbing, clearly. Psychological, monster, killer, and finally paranormal. All 5 major genres. The gore and disturbing. This breaks down as torture, splatter, cannibalism, and extreme. So these would be the ones with multiple dismemberments and, torture. Like if you watched Hostel, they're torturing their victims before they chop them up. And obviously cannibalism, that would be The Forest. So these type of movies have that just, oh my god, I'm caught in this genre of, oh my god, like this could, god, I can't imagine what I would do in this situation, being tied up and tortured and knowing that I'm going to die. Like, so that's horrifying. That's absolutely horrifying. I would not want to go through that. So then, let's go to killer. Obviously, slasher films, crimes, backwoods, and home invasion. Like The Strangers, or Scream, the slasher films. Crime, obviously being robbed in the middle of the night. Backwoods, I mean, getting lost in the woods. And The Hills Have Eyes is a perfect example, where you had a bunch of deformed hillbillies in the middle of the woods. being tracked down in the woods with no escape is terrifying. So, let's go to psychological. Phobia and isolation. I mean, anybody who's claustrophobic, the perfect example is the movie with Ryan Reynolds, where he's trapped in a coffin and has to try to survive long enough for his captor, for his troops to come and get him. It's called Captive. It's a really good movie. Phantasm, madness and paranoia, and home invasion again. So, like, not so much panic room for the home invasion psychological, but more of maybe like misery. Maybe not much, but phobia and isolation obviously is the bigger one in this category. And then of course we got monsters. I mean, zombies, undead, or from viruses. Resident Evil is your perfect example. Night of the Living Dead, chemical related, they raise the dead. Vampires, werewolves, I mean, take your pick on this one. You've got, Dracula, and you've got Wolfman, and then you've got, obviously, them together in movies like Underworld. Classic mythology, or mythological creatures, that is a thing. Giant monsters, neo-monsters, animals and nature, small creatures, and of course aliens. So clearly aliens, everybody wants to try to meet one. The only good one is E.T. Obviously it's not a horror film, but again, when you think of aliens, Twilight Zone had a really good episode called To Serve Man, and this one was about these big 9-foot tall aliens who came down and try to broker peace with the humans, trying to help them grow the civilization. But in return, humans had to go to their home planet. But they left their book behind. So the scientists were trying to figure out what the book meant, or the title at least, and they realized at the very, very end, as their main scientist is getting onto the ship to go to their planet, find out that the book itself is called To Serve Man, a cookbook. And so they are bringing these people to their home planet to cannibalize them. So again, you've got a lot of things. And again, this all has a lot of integral parts. But the main theory is the 5 major ones. And then, of course, paranormal. Ghost, haunted house, possession, devil and demons, witches and occults, and supernatural. Of course. People are terrified of ghosts or haunted houses. I can understand. I've had some encounters with one ghost that's really kind of did a lot to me, and it's kind of unnerving. But for the most part, physical touching or just talking in general is or trying to communicate with them has been most of my thing, except for that one time up at the Shanley Hotel. So those are your 5 major categories and what subgenres are in there. Then eventually things came around where they did more subgenres, like comedy horror. Example, Zombieland, which is a great film, by the way. Zombieland 2, not so bad, but Zombieland was really good. Then you've got your sci-fi horror, which is obviously Aliens, and uh, Cameron's vision for that movie was really good, taking from Ridley Scott's original Alien. Romance horror, Let the Right One In. Uh, Let the Right One In is um, terrifying in that somebody's love has been turned into, uh, you know, a zombie or in this case, is a vampire. And so, uh, do you choose to still love them and want to be with them, or do you keep them out and let them just go? You know what I mean? So it is kind of a weird dynamic, but it works. Creepy kids. I mean, holy shit. Um, Creepy kids. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how many movies you've seen with creepy kids, but they are kind of creepy. A lot of them are females, though. It's so bizarre. But obviously, the biggest one in that genre would be Omen. I mean, giving birth to the Antichrist is, geez, I don't even want to know. I'm glad my two boys are uh, healthy and not the spawn of Satan. Gothic, a great movie in this regard, Crimson Peak. Yes, I know, Jessica Chastain was in it. She played the creepy sister to Tom Hiddleston, and in this film, it was really, really good. So if you haven't seen that, you should check that out. Revenge. I Spit on Your Grave. A woman that's left for dead in a grave, and she comes back to take out her uh, attackers and the people that try to kill her. Pretty good movie. Found footage. This genre I am not a fan of. Paranormal Activity is your biggest one in this category. Look, found footage I know is kind of contradictory to what I do for paranormal and put it on YouTube or just in general. But this genre has gotten away from itself, and everything now that is found footage happens to really not have to be. Paranormal Activity, they had a bunch of movies in this um, under this name, and they got just weirder and weirder. And as found footage goes, take it or leave it. I know there's a lot of people who loved Blair Witch. I'm telling you right now, I was not a big fan of Blair Witch. And I give those guys a ton of credit for sparking a subgenre of horror in that regard. It was a college project by three people with practically no budget, and this movie made a ton of money. But, that being said, I was not a fan of it. And the reason why is because the characters were just, I don't know, unrelatable, or the fact that they were, really whiny and stuff. And I'm not really big on that. Like, uh, you know, if you're going to do horror, or you're going to do even watching some people, do, um, ghost hunts. Um, the extra screaming and, being over the top. it bothers me because yes, I've had experiences, but I've never had one where I've absolutely lost my mind. Even the one in Shanley, where um, I was pretty scared, but I never got to a point where I was screaming my bloody head off and trying to run out the building. It's just so, halfway through this movie, I was praying for them to die at some point. So I give them a ton of credit in the world, and they did an amazing job with it and sparked a whole new genre. Because then Cloverfield came out, and it just spawned a whole bunch. And Cloverfield is just terrible. I'm sorry. I know they spun off a couple more movies, even one in space. It's just, I don't know. I just can't. I cannot gravitate toward found footage. I can't. Then obviously we get into anthologies. So uh, VHS is a really good anthology, and you should definitely check that out if you do. They've got a bunch of them. And then finally, technology. So this is a brand new one because of the social media aspect. And the biggest one in this one is Unfriended. So this was a movie about these high school kids who regularly met, on their computers, and uh, this one friend in particular was having a hard time. Something had spread around on social media, and he wound up killing himself, or did he? And so the cyberbullies in this one were his targets, and he snuffed them out one by one as he unfriended other people and so on. So it was obviously born around technology, but it was also psychological. Speaking back of psychological, if you've ever watched Japanese horror, I recommend it because you've got movies like The Ring and The Grudge that came out obviously in America. They were Americanized. If you watch the Japanese version of these movies, they're psychological. Japanese horror is definitely psychological. Even one I will mention later on in uh, in my review of some movies from different decades, and it is probably one of the more fascinating Japanese horror films of all times. It is super scary, and I will mention it later. So, that is your history lesson on genres. So, I failed to mention that this is going to be a two-parter, so I will finish this episode with the top movies from the Warner Brothers Fandango website poll. So remember, the category was It and Blade, Final Destination versus The Shining, Texas Chainsaw Massacre versus Poltergeist, The Exorcist versus Creepshow, Beetlejuice versus Trick or Treat, Last Days versus Lost Boys versus Wicker Man, Annabelle versus Conjuring, and Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th was the other one. So let me go through this really quickly. It advanced for me Shining, Poltergeist, Exorcist, then Beetlejuice, Lost Boys, Conjuring, and Nightmare on Elm Street. So then obviously Shining and Exorcist moving on. Lost Boys over Beetlejuice, I know. Conjuring over Nightmare. And then the final four, Exorcist over The Shining, Conjuring over Lost Boys, and then the finals, Exorcist over The Conjuring. Exorcist was the winner for me. So, again, as I said at the beginning, the fans or the IG page went a little differently. They had it winning the whole thing. Now, I get it. The remakes with all the special effects and just, so scary with clowns. I get it. And I get the new generation seeing those films, not seeing maybe the original, or maybe they saw the original but loved these films. But how The Exorcist doesn't win this, or maybe even Poltergeist or Shining doesn't win this. Again, I think this might be more for maybe generationally, but it was an interesting poll anyway. So,
let us get into movies. So, or best movies, or movies that I would recommend, or best movies that I have seen in certain genres. Let's start with the kids. Okay. I have two, obviously, George and AJ. And I would say that for kid friendly horror, animated or non animated. So you got your animated. You've got Frankenweenie, which was out in 2012, Monsters Inc. 2001. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Monsters Inc. is really not that scary, but the concept obviously is scary. A monster's coming into a young girl's room to scare them. So, again, this is where the lines blur from horror to just a regular kids' comedy. Paranorman 2012, Monster House 2006, Corpse Bride 2005, Coraline 2009, Hotel Transylvania 2012 sparked three more movies, and then obviously the one from my generation, and I loved 1949's The Adventures of Ichabod Crane and Mr. Toad, along with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. These are two short films that they linked together, and those movies were really good when I was growing up. Although I did not grow up in 1949, but I'm just saying, in general, those two movies are funny, but they're also a little scary for children. And then, obviously, the king of it would be Nightmare Before Christmas, 1993. So, again, scary to kids because, Jack Skellington's a skeleton, and you've got Halloween Town, and you've got Christmas, and, combining the two. So those are the kid-friendly, as far as kid-friendly regular movies, or as they get into teenagers. You got Gremlins, 1984, Ghostbusters, 1984. I loved Ghostbusters. I mentioned this on the Ghostbusters episode that I did. One of the first movies I ever sat down front at a movie theater. I told myself I would never do that again, but it was opening weekend. I went with a buddy of mine, and it was basically, the only seats we had available, and because theater was packed, and so having to see it kind of twisted made it very, very interesting. Along that same line, you'll have Addams Family, which was 1991, Casper, 1995, Goosebumps, 2015, Arachnophobia, 1990. Now, this movie, obviously, if you are a scared of spiders, do not watch this movie. It is so creepy. I know my son George is definitely afraid of spiders. I know I could never get him to watch this movie, but it was so terrifying. It was funny. Jeff Daniels was in this film as the star of this film, and he actually did an amazing job, and all of that acting was real. He was not fake. He was definitely scared of spiders. So it made it very, very interesting. I give him a ton of credit for doing it, and it was a really good film. And then, of course, Beetlejuice is obviously a very kid-friendly kind of movie, 1988, and then Little Shop of Horrors, 1986. Not so much scary, but for some reason it is in the horror genre. Steve Martin and Rick Moranis with the big Venus flytrap. He's such a crazy movie. It was a musical, so it was it was definitely funny. So that goes to the comedy horror aspect. So let's go through movies or best movies of the decades voted by fans and writers everywhere. So obviously I mentioned early on in 1920, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligula was the scariest movie of the 20s. The 30s was Frankenstein. This movie was made in 1931. 1940, The Uninvited. 1944. This movie was redone back in 2012, I think it was. Not as good as the original. 1950, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. 1956. Crazy pod people. It's such a crazy film. And it's horrifying, though, to think that somebody could steal your body or steal your look and try to act as you. It's kind of crazy. Clearly, 1960 was owned by Psycho, which was 1960 it came out. Norman Bates. I mean, talk about a character with psychological issues. His mother is still in his house. He is talking through her, talking as her, dressing as her, and I think the show Bates Motel really put a interesting spin on his relationship with his mother. Now, it was modernized a little bit, obviously, with technology and whatnot, but the premise of it was his mother was overbearing, didn't think that he, could survive out on his own, was, made sure that, he was always loving his mother, and his mother was always doing things and for him. And Bates Motel ended with him killing his mother and then, kind of taking over that psychological guilt. And this is where, if you go back and look at, Norman talking to his first victim and then going up into the house and having this psychological breakdown with his mother saying that, get that woman out of here or I'm going to have to take care of her. And then he snaps and he winds up killing her in the shower, which is the most iconic scene ever. And, the rest is history. So this movie is completely psychological and obviously a slasher film at the same time. 1970, The Exorcist. 1973, this movie was made. And I'll talk about The Exorcist in a minute. 1980, The Shining. Talk about going completely insane. you've got your complete isolation in a hotel for months, and it's snowing. There's no way to get out of there. There's nobody around for miles. At times, the radios don't work. Then at one point, obviously, he dispatches the radio. To be completely isolated is scary. Just like when you talk about outer space movies, being isolated out in space has got to be scary enough, because one false move and you're never coming home. So that kind of thing can drive a person insane. Obviously, in The Shining, that's what happened. 1990, Scream ruled that decade. 1996. Obviously, it was the beginning of a new genre of slasher films or teen horror films, and Scream definitely lived up to that hype, and subsequently has continued to go on and on. 2000, and I don't agree with this at all, by the way, but Paranormal Activity was rooted. It was the best one for that genre or that decade. I absolutely, completely disagree. There are so many better movies in 2000 than that, and I'll go through those later. 2010, this one was kind of interesting, was Get Out. And this movie was completely psychological, and it was really well done. But again, I thought there was so much more better films out there that could have taken that spot. So with all that combined, let's look at so you've got your genre, you've got your best movies of decades. So I'll talk about the number one movie, the scariest movie voted by fans, everybody out there. The Exorcist. Absolutely terrifying. That a demon possessing a small child. Was she small? Yeah, she was a young student. And, the Catholic Church trying to say that she wasn't possessed. It was all, made up. And then eventually they realize that she is marked by the demon, the devil. And it's just a crazy film. And it's scary. The scene where she's walking down the stairs backwards is, what? So I want to just a side note on this movie. So when they re-released it in the theaters and added some footage and whatnot, I went to see it. Obviously The Exorcist came out when I was a young boy, so as I became a teenager, I got to see this film. But going to the theater and seeing it re-released with a bunch of teenagers in the movie theater, when that scene happened where she was walking down the stairs and some of this other stuff, and the kids were laughing, I don't know how I felt about it. I just felt like, why are people laughing? Like this, you have to remember, this is 1973. We don't have that big special effects like every movie now has, where you've got your jump scares and you've got, just terrifying gore. And so this movie was definitely scary. If you don't agree with me, that's fine too. And I would love some feedback on any of this stuff that I've talked about in this episode. So I want to go over a list of movies from the decades that I've been alive. So let's go back to 1970. I was born in 76. So you've got Jaws, 1975. Now, this one is a little weird for me because I don't find this to be horrific. or it is scary though, because I'm not a big ocean person, so not knowing what is in the waters is terrifying to me. So if it's not a pool, I don't go in it. Just, plain and simple. Halloween, 1978, the birth of the first Scream Queen, Jamie Lee Curtis, about a babysitter being stalked. Right? It's terrifying. Alien, 1979. Again, out in space, finding a alien ship, being brought back onto the ship, and then having an alien running around after bursting through a chest. Scary. Dawn of the Dead, 1973. Sparked a whole bunch of movies from there. Carrie, 1976. A child with telepathic powers and a mother who was absolutely terrified of her child, and just it was a crazy film. The Omen, well, I mentioned that earlier, 1976. Amityville Horror, 1979. Crazy to know what the Lutzes went through. It's well documented. And then, of course, The Exorcist. So then you get the 80s. You've got The Shining, Friday the 13th. Now, Gremlins is in this one. Aliens is in this one. How about The Fog, 1980? We all drive in the fog, and just thinking that there are monsters in the fog, kind of creepy. Pet Sematary, Jesus Christ. We've all had pets that have died. I don't want to see them come back from the dead. It's so crazy. But then and again, the grief of a parent losing a child, but trying to reanimate them never goes well. Great film though. Predator is on this list, and I don't know exactly why Predator is in the horror genre. I don't know. It's weird to me. 1987, and then Poltergeist is 1982. One of the scariest films for me when I was growing up. Again, like I said, I literally lived under my covers for years. 1990s saw some really creepy ones. You've got Misery, 1990. Being isolated in a delusional fan's world, being held hostage, basically. Crazy film. Kathy Bates was amazing in this film. All right, next we will talk about Sleepy Hollow, 1999. Again, based on a horror lore of the Headless Horseman. So, some people find it a little scary. It was okay. More witchy and so on, but still a good film. Sixth Sense, 1999. M. Night Shyamalan's first big movie about a kid who sees dead people. And Bruce Willis, if you haven't seen the movie, please, I'm going to spoil it right now so you can turn it off. But Bruce Willis not knowing that he is actually a dead person is a amazing twist. This was M. Night Shyamalan's breakout film. I will have a M. Night Shyamalan episode once I finish with Trap, and I will do that review and a review of his movies, good and bad. And I know he's got his ups and downs, but we'll talk about that. Scream, obviously, I talked about 1996 in the last one. Obviously, it turned a whole genre around, and spawned many sequels, and then spawned other franchises like I Know What You Did Last Summer with Jennifer Love Hewitt. I didn't like that series. I think it was trying to capitalize on the teen horror, but it wasn't as good. Although it did star Sarah Michelle Gellar, and I love Sarah Michelle Gellar, I really do. But I wasn't a big fan of this franchise. Let's talk about Seven and Silence of the Lambs. So these are horror in multiple categories of the subgenres. So a lot of people don't think Silence of the Lambs and Seven are horror films. They are rooted in horror, but obviously suspense and thriller is what people think of in this regard. But hear me out on this. So Seven, you have not so much a serial killer, but a man who is obviously not really insane, but psychologically damaged, where he comes up with this plan to execute the 7 deadly sins. And the time and precision to operate this all and plan it all out is what's terrifying about this. Because obviously, clearly, we do not have all the information until the very end. So you need to know why he did these horrific acts to these people, the 7 deadly sins. And then clearly his masterpiece was to be finished, and he knew what buttons to push. He knew he was going to die one way or the other. He wanted to die on his own. So, and then being, Brad Pitt's character being confronted with that choice to either take his life or allow him to live, even though he took the head off of his wife and didn't know that she was pregnant. So it is a horrifying thing to think of. So in that regard, it is a horror film. Silence of the Lambs is also, because you have the birth of Hannibal Lecter, who is a psychology professor by day or by trade, and then obviously a killer, a cannibal by night or weekend or whatever it is. So we understand that Hannibal Lecter is just a mass murderer, basically. And he is, or psycho killer, whatever you want to call him. And he is, in prison, we get to meet Clarice Sterling, played by Jodie Foster, an amazing actress. This movie was so good. But it's also terrifying in the fact that Buffalo Bill, or Wild Bill, was out there collecting bodies and skinning them alive and then wearing their skin. That's horrifying. That is body deformity. It's a lot of psychological problems. So, and the horrifying thing about it is the way it was, shown, where, always dark, and, his character was just a psychopath that, preyed on people. So, and then, digging up her past while talking to Lecter, and it's just, I think it belongs in the horror genre because of the multitude of subgenres that it goes through. So, Silence of the Lambs is one. One that a lot of people don't know of, and again, is not the first thing you would think of as horror. You would think of it as a sci-fi. Is a movie called Cube. It is about strangers that are locked in cubes. And as they move, some of the cubes are booby-trapped. Some of the cubes are safe. So as they start moving around these cubes, they keep finding more people in the cubes. and then they have to figure out a way to find a way out because they're trapped in this thing. But they don't know how to get out. So they go through many different things, like red rooms are bad. Well, eventually they wind up only seeing red rooms, so they have to figure out which one isn't bad or good. There's a multitude of different aspects in the 6 characters that are in there, especially one that is autistic. But he is a number savant, so they have to use him because each room or each cube has a room number or a slot in position, which they realize afterwards as the walls in some of the rooms are shaking. Well, they realize that there is one cube on the outside of this probably very large cube that is moving around in certain spots, or it's moving cubes around the cube. So there has to be one cube to get out, and they have to figure it out. And it's terrifying because, again, isolation will cause mayhem. And the strong cop who is trying to galvanize the team, but he's very hard on them for being too weak or whatever, winds up going completely insane and starts killing a few people because, again, the isolation, and he wants to get out of there. He wants to be the first one to get out and leave the rest of them there and let them suffer. So in that regard, it is a horror film, but if you really look at it on the surface, it's a sci-fi movie. And it's a very good sci-fi movie, so definitely check it out. It's called Cube. Finally, the one I mentioned in the last one about the Japanese horror film. This one will scare the living daylights out of you. Audition, 1999. So this one is about a woman who basically tortures and sacrifices a man who is a domestic for hitting women and stuff. She literally tortures him to death, and just psychologically being frozen or tied down or just frozen in fear is terrifying. Then when somebody is trying to talk to you and you're trying to answer and you don't answer right, you're getting cut, or you're getting sawed or whatever. It's just terrifying. It is such a good film, though. I would definitely recommend this film. This came out in 1999. So that was the 90s. 2000s opened up a whole new world. So there are so many films, but I want to talk about a few briefly. 28 Days Later, the zombie one. You had also World War Z as well come out. Saw was another movie in 2004. Now, funny thing about Saw is the movie was really, really good until the very end, when Cary Elway's character decides to go and get help, and the only way he can do that is to cut off his own foot and drag himself out. I found this very funny that, again, he's bleeding, his foot's on the ground. How the hell is he going to get out, even though he has no idea where he's going to go? He's going to pass out from the blood he's lost. So, again, things like that. So, as Saw got better, or more and more, although the 3D one was not really good, and they should have not done it in 3D. But Saw has become such a great series over time. They redid it, they prequeled it with Jigsaw. Saw 10 went back and did a little bit of prequel as well. There is another one coming out soon. I think it's been pushed, but I don't have all the details yet. I will try to get that. A movie called The Descent, 2005. This is four adventurous ladies who wind up in a cave. They get lost and do not realize that there are creatures down there that are blind and only can go by sound. And this is terrifying because, again, movement or them talking or bickering because they can't find their way out, or this one did that and this one did this, and such a, terrifying because you're in a cave way below the surface trying to find a way out as, you got lost. Kind of scary. So this movie was good. The second one was bad, just so you know. The Strangers, 2008. Being isolated in the woods, let's say Verbo or Airbnb getaway. You're there with your family, and some people in masks are outside your windows, terrorizing you. I mean, that's pretty frightening. And then somehow they get in, and then they tie you up, and it's a very terrifying movie. It was good though, 2008. Then we had Hannibal that came out in 2001. This is very gruesome in the fact that this was the one where Hannibal Lecter had Ray Liotta's brain for dinner, or he was cutting it right in front of Clarice, who was then played by Julianne Moore, and that is an iconic scene from that movie. Also in 2000s was Red Dragon, which is a remake of a prequel to Silence of the Lambs. So the remake was of a movie called Manhunter. So it's basically the same film, but this time they added some things, and the acting and the production value was so much better. They had Edward Norton, obviously Anthony Hopkins. They had the late Philip Seymour Hoffman in this film, and Ralph Fiennes played the Red Dragon. So this movie was really, really good. That came out in 2003. Hannibal came out in 2001. So that finished the trilogy of Hannibal Lecter. And then subsequently they made two other Hannibal films, not as good, or really just leave those out of your Hannibal Lecter watching. You should go and probably see the Hannibal show, which was really good, and Lawrence Fishburne was in that series, and obviously Mads Madison, who I met at Boston Comic Con. And then there was another remake that actually was pretty good, Amityville Horror, in 2005. Ryan Reynolds. This was a different version of the legend of the Amityville Horror House. Basically, they were talking about it in the Puritan years down in the basement area, and that's where all the souls were kept. So I don't buy that part, but Ryan Reynolds and Melissa George, who played the Lutzes, was a really good acting job. So the movie itself was probably not based on another lore or whatever, but the original Amityville Horror is where it's at as far as the legend is concerned. So one other one was The Grudge, and this is a remake of obviously a Japanese film. Sarah Michelle Gellar played in this one too. It's one reason why I kind of enjoyed this film, because I actually enjoyed the Japanese version so much better. Then 2010, the decade. Obviously, you had It and It 2. Insidious started in 2010. It has 5 movies now. Sinister was really, really good. 2012. And spawned a sequel. Really, really good series. The Purge, the original Purge, 2013. Subsequently, it made a few more films. The Purge, Anarchy, then there were 2 prequels before that. Or, no, there was one sorry, it's getting late. And another one, the Forever Purge. And so the Purge movie itself was terrifying. Again, a family stuck in their home behind their security walls. And the mayhem that was going on outside. So the country was, you had your 12 hours to pretty much purge, kill, loot, whatever you could do for one day a year. That was legal. Obviously, if you did it outside of that, it was not legal. But so this is a very interesting concept, and it's very horrifying. And to think, which side would you be on? Would you be a purger, or would you be somebody who would be locked in their home and defending your home at all costs? Do you have somebody that you would want to kill? Or would you just go out and try to, steal from your neighbors or steal from department stores or whatever you could break into? But knowing the dangers of being killed. If you are out there, you're liable to get killed. Or, again, would you barricade yourself in and defend your family or defend your house at all costs? So it's an interesting dynamic. It's a, psychological, cat and mouse game. And finally, The Conjuring, which spawned a entire universe of, events around the Warrens. As somebody who is a part-time paranormal investigator, I enjoyed the original Conjuring, Conjuring 2, Conjuring 3. I was not a fan of Annabelle. Annabelle Creation wasn't too bad. Annabelle Comes Home was actually interesting, and I don't know the particulars as to what side this was told from, but if it was told from the daughter's side, I would question why the Warrens would have kept such a doll in the house, knowing full well that it was that haunted. Although it's technically not in the house. The movies make it seem like their basement is where the museum was. It is not. In real life, there's their house, and then they have like a garage set up, and that is where all the things they've collected, all the haunted things that they have collected over the years. Obviously now, the Warrens are long since gone. The son-in-law has taken over that possessions, and he is thinking about making a bigger museum so that people could go and see it. Because right now, obviously situated in their yard, and they have a lot of no trespassing up there, because there's a lot of people that are very curious about what is in that place now that it's been closed down. obviously beforehand the museum was open so you could go and see it, but now it's kind of closed now to the public until things probably can get easier. So that's it. I mean, right now we're early 2020s, so I don't really want to go through a lot of films there, but just going through, again, all these categories and all these films. I know there's a lot I've left off. I know people are going to be like, well, what about this movie? What about that movie? Well, again, these are just movies that I have enjoyed and I think is representative of the horror genre in general. And again, you can say that some of these movies weren't horror genre. Well, again, technically they are, because they have elements of horror in them. So whether you believe they are or not, I mean, that's up to you to decide. Like Silence of the Lambs, like Seven, even Jaws for that matter, even Predator for that matter, because like I said, for some reason, Predator is on that list. Is it horrifying? I don't know. I mean, it can be. I mean, you're in a forest and being hunted, so I guess that's technically that. And again, it's hard to determine when you get into horror parts to make it a horror film or make it onto a list of horror. But again, those are my recommendations. If you guys have any, please send them along. I would love to talk to you about them or talk about it on a future episode.
You like that, baby? Let him know where I came from, yeah!
See you next time. Bye.
Waiting for you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Hasta la vista, baby.
That's all, folks.